Wait, stop.
Okay. Hi guys, my name is Andrea and this is Sarah, and today we're just going to be talking about our experiences regarding multi-counseling and certain challenges that we both have faced, and how this course and this class has helped us grow in that area. So we can start with Sarah. So Sarah, what's an aspect of multicultural counseling that was previously challenged for you?
Thank you, Andrea. One thing um, I learned about myself is that I have a bias against organized religion based on some things that I experienced when I was growing up. And it took me some time to actually come to that conclusion and to realize that I had experienced some trauma. And that's why whenever I would read that some counselors utilize religion as a means to empower their clients, I was always like met with this wall of emotion where I was like, no. And I'm like, I consider myself a secular person. So what that means is religion and government don't belong together. Um, and then it took me some time to come to terms with like what I was feeling and where it was coming from. And once I discovered that, I was able to like work through some of those issues. And now, after reading some of the comments through the discussions, I do value in recognizing that our clients are, if we're inside of a culture, that we do want to respect that culture and keep in mind that our client is the in that culture, and we kind of put our own thoughts and our identity and everything away. And I think as the instructor taught us, like put ourselves in the corner, we don't exist in that room. We are there kind of panel to help empower our clients. And if that means understanding their religion, um, then I need to do homework on understanding that particular culture, spiritual or religious um, frame of reference, so that when they come to me about a problem, I can say, okay, well, within the context of your religion, here are some things that will help you with that situation. Um, I did bring up some references for that. Um, so Sager 2022 recommends several key techniques for introducing religion and spirituality in counseling. One of which is using open-ended questions. Don't try to pigeonhole the client into known religions or archetypes. So also make sure that this is a type of counseling that they're open to receiving, or it's a part of their identity. Because even though they might be from a particular culture, maybe they don't have that religious affiliation. So that's important to know. Um, Secondly, use active listening. The client is better able to communicate their religious beliefs than any reference material. So I can't learn it from a book. Um, Third is creative incorporation. Getting to know the client and their beliefs first is the key before incorporating religion or spirituality into a client care plan. And I think that's important. So if I'm going into a particular area, so for example, the Mormon community, if I know that I'm moving into a Mormon community, I can do some research before I start opening a counseling practice where I'm counseling people from that particular group. So that's important to be um, consciously, you know, learning. And then there was one more. Um, Doomy Lescu 2022 offered some other ones that were more religious based, and I really liked these. Religious models can be used as models for virtues such as kindness and resilience. Um, second religious characters can be used for to normalize emotions for like um, Jesus also experienced anger or sadness, and so we can talk about feelings in from a reference that is familiar, so that we can talk about things that are difficult. And then finally, which I do believe in, prayer can be used to build community self-awareness or can be a soothing technique. So I definitely like that aspect. Um, Before we move on into the cultural aspect, um, did have some references for different religions, especially in the community that I'm in now. There's um, there's a population of Mennonites. There's a population of the Homestead Heritage, which is kind of like a secular, like an offshoot of a very conservative group. I don't want to say it's a very conservative religious group, and so to counsel people from that particular group, I would definitely need to know more in depth about their religion, to be able to be of the most use for them. And then I also have a Muslim community here, and we have a large Catholic Hispanic population, um, and a lot of Buddhism and alternative medicine practices, and also an influence of um, not voodoo, but voodoo flavored kind of Cajun influences, because we have a large immigrant population from Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. So we have kind of good mix of cultures, and I really enjoy that aspect. So if I were to look at my community, I would be very careful to ask my client, how do you feel about religion? What is your point of view and perspective? And make sure um, understanding of their point of view prior to counseling them within that framework.
That was really good. And I think it's really, you touch on some major key points that is talking about us as future counselors putting ourselves in a corner where we, or in a space where we allow ourselves to learn about the client, you know?
Mhm.
And whenever it comes to like religion or even like political beliefs, it can be challenging
Mhm.
conversations to that do not surface out of right away. So it's important to put ourselves in that space where we can learn from the client. And like you mentioned, the client is the best teacher, and we're not going to learn all the information from the book right away. But I
Right.
do agree with you. And unlike you, that you have all this culture and all this diverse background around you, I think for me, one of the most challenges multicultural aspects that I was dealing, especially when I started college, was just engaging or acknowledging individual backgrounds. Like I mentioned before, I grew up in a community where the same ethnic, religious backgrounds were shared. So
Right.
I believe that for a period of my lifetime, I did struggle on just understanding diverse cultural backgrounds. And I think it's important as counselors to acknowledge that and see how it has. Like you can learn, like you learn from the client, and it's a barrier that I feel like having that aspect is kind of like it is a barrier that it does not allow us to understand our clients' experiences, which is a something we need to develop, or at least me have that skill in order to provide my clients with the resources they need, or um, how in the community there those disadvantages they have are they're being affected. So
Yes.
I do believe it's important to educate ourselves, and learning from the client is the best way we can do that.
I really like that you said that because one of the things that we learned is that multicultural counseling is a lifelong project. And so that requires us to kind of be aware in each situation that we're in, not only of our own biases and like our origin stories, but what our knowledge is of our surroundings. And so if we recognize that there is something we don't know, then it's inherent upon us, it's incumbent upon us to to obtain that information. And like you said, develop the resources that you can utilize to help counsel your client. So that's a really good point about um, multicultural counseling um, that you brought up. So that's really important. And then secondly, I've always loved that story that you share about coming from kind of a heteronormative background where everybody had the same identity in the background and religion and kind of everybody was the same culturally. And then when you moved to college, that was a huge culture shock for you. And you did an amazing thing, which was reached out of your comfort zone and you joined these clubs. And so, as a counselor, we would be encouraged to do the same thing. Um, I think that the instructor said something like, get used to being the only person of your identity in a room with different people and start attending different events and learn and be open-minded about that. And so I really like that you put that into practice from your first steps into another culture. So I think that's like a really cool inherent trait that you have, which is good, which is well suited for counseling.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I know, like, I talked to you before, and something that really like resonated with me that you mentioned, and as I was going through these questions and stuff, and just understanding individuals' experiences. And you mentioned that we might come from different backgrounds, but we might share the same experiences, but for different reasons, you know? So as counselors, I think it's really important to acknowledge that when we're counseling a population that might be diverse from us. Like, okay, yeah, like maybe they went through the same experience as we did, but it could be for different reasons, and the process is different for everyone. So I think acknowledging that it's really, really, really important. And I'm glad that you brought that up in our last conversation because I resonated with that, and it allowed me to get through this paper, through this PowerPoint more easily too.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. I just have had a couple of experiences and I hosted foreign exchange students. And one thing that I noticed is that all of the families from the different countries want the same thing. They want their children to be educated. They want to be safe. They want to have careers. They want to have jobs. They all want to see their children be more successful than they are. And that's a global desire. And then, and then outside of being a parent, like we all yearn for connection, whether that's with our friendships or with our family or, our loved ones. But there are still themes that resonate across the globe. Like you said, um, some of our experiences may be similar, even though we're coming from two different backgrounds. And it's important um, to get to know our clients, those connections. And yeah, thank you for remembering. That's very sweet.
No, yeah, it's really important. And I feel like as someone who is in this field and wants to be a counselor, it's important to acknowledge that, you know, because it's a long
Yeah.
life, like you said, it's a long life journey, just being in this field and learning multicultural competence and how we can become the best versions of ourselves on educating ourselves on that concept or that subject to provide the client with what they need. Oh, I think you froze. Can you
But
hear me now?
yeah,
That's
sorry,
what.
I lost you. But are we still in the same meet? Are
Um,
we still inside the same
yes,
meeting?
yes, yes,
Okay, well, we can just continue. Hopefully, we can erase that part. Sorry about
yes.
that.
You're fine. And I was timing us, so we still have 12 minutes. I put
Oh,
25 minutes, so we still have 12 minutes. So I think we're doing good on time. Just
okay, sure.
for just to put it out there. Okay. And it's still recording, so we're good.
Okay. Why don't you lead us into the next question? I think we have kind of about some of the different aspects of multiculturalism, but let's make sure that we address all the questions.
Okay, yes. Um, okay, to continue on, what are some ways do you think you have grown your understanding on multiculturalism and diversity that has influenced your
Um,
approach to the professional counseling world?
um, I think it was like I said, just kind of having that epiphany when she said, "We are not the expert in the room," and kind of put yourself away, and that was really profound for me. For some reason, I was like, I need to do the homework to understand the cultural lots of the culture that I'm going to be counseling in, and that's my responsibility. But when I'm in the room, my thoughts and feelings are not part of that room. Like I am there simply to kind of empower my client and help them heal. And so um, it doesn't matter where I'm coming from or what my background in it is, or unless it's something that I can relate to them and we can have a mutual understanding. But for the most part, um, I can still empower a client within the framework um, that they are comfortable in. Um, and I know how to do that. And I'm learning the skills as a counselor to be able to do that. So, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I have an understanding of what my responsibility is. And like I said, that was a very profound statement. I was just like, oh, yeah, put yourself away. You're here for them. They are the person in the room who is getting attended to, and you are essentially just a channel. So, I, the biggest thing for me, I mean, I have had a number of different, um, I grew up in different cultures. We moved around all the time, and I'm really grateful to that experience of being exposed to different cultures and communities. But I also understand that even though I was exposed to a lot of them, um, pieces of my identity are because my parents tried to make normalize, like so. Um, they had me go to church when I was younger, for example, and even though the church has changed throughout the U.S., like at least I got that kind of background information and that knowledge. So, um, yeah, I think for me, the biggest change was just learning to and make sure that I was educated and I had the right tools because I am not the most important person in the room that my client is. And that was like, it's simple, like, like I said, so profound for me to just remember that.
No, yeah, I can definitely agree and relate to that. Just being self-aware, like you mentioned, having
Hmm.
that self-awareness of our
Hmm.
biases, our stereotypes, um, we can reflect on that, and it allows us to make an approach in our daily lives as future counselors. And I also
Hmm.
believe that counselors play a crucial role in creating an environment that makes the patient feel safe. And I feel like
Hmm.
the first step for that is being self-aware that, okay, this is not about me, this is about the client. The client might be
Hmm.
going through some experiences that I've gone in my life, but this where we put that awareness of like you mentioned, this is not about me, this is about the client and what can I do best to help that client in that moment and in that situation. So I would say
Yeah.
that a major ground that I have is just recognizing of being aware and and engaging in my understanding about diverse cultures and how I
Hmm.
can kind of disassociate myself from like, okay, this is their their experience, not mine.
Right.
And I also believe it's important, probably as counselors, or at least for me, is to just have a self-assessment, you know?
Mhm.
And I feel like this process allows you to create a foundation where you can engage with your clients in an
Hmm.
environment where they feel respected, heard, understood, and mostly safe.
Yes.
Especially if your background, like, or your ethnicity, even I feel like sometimes the way someone looks might be intimidating for someone who's completely different than you.
Mhm.
So definitely like having that self-assessment and creating that environment can help the client feel like they're in a safe space to share their experiences. And I also think I've grown in building just relationships, you know? Even like in this course where we do live discussions or we don't even interact with our peers, but like just creating those relationships where I'm actively building listening skills and just showing empathy for my colleagues or my friends can those skills can be transferred in a environment setting.
Hmm. I agree with your sentiment. I feel that we are learning to trust one another inside of this school, inside of this educational environment. And I have seen people open up, and during the discussions, they will share things that are very personal that relate to the material that we're going through. And it really helps me to. Let me just finish. It does just to be vulnerable, I think, and also to be cognizant of others' point of views. And we're learning through this process. And also, we can do that self-assessment, like you're saying, and to make sure that we are gauging our reactions to the material so that we can learn and grow from the things that we still have blockages on. So I think as we start moving into more clinical settings, that we're going to be really preparing ourselves for being vulnerable and knowing what that is to a client. And I think that's really beneficial. And so I think that this class is teaching us um, how important it is to be cognizant of other points of view and validate that experience for them, for the clients.
Yes, I agree with you. And now that you bring up like once we start like doing our counseling sessions or we start in the training field, it brings us to the next question, which is have how have you shown growth in an area that is necessary to explore in the field of professional counseling to best serve the public, adhere to professional standards, engage in advocacy for populations, and engage in respectful relationships?
One thing that I've really to learn is how to research, and so how to find resources online for clients with regards to some of the needs that they might have, how to be an advocate, how to be aware of some of the, I mean, I am kind of socially aware and um, a big defender of vulnerable people and oppressed people. That's kind of my niche, but getting that kind of accreditation, like having the knowledge and having the research to back um, my point of view is going to be really helpful because I can actually speak from a voice of authority and I can actually be more um, when I speak or when I share something, it will be from a place of education and not from a place of opinion. And I think that that is really that we have this class that is teaching us how to use research to be more informed and how to get that and how to find classes and how to change and how to change ourselves. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, I have shown growth in advocacy. Um,
Mhm.
for example, I work with kids who have autism. I provide them therapy. However, I have been able to volunteer in organizations outside of work that helps families with providing them resources they need to families who might not be able to afford um, therapy for their loved ones due to certain issues, either economic, population, and stuff like that. So I
Mhm.
feel like as counselors, when we advocate for the patient or for our clients, it's not only in the counseling setting or like in the therapeutic relationship, but it's kind of going above and beyond and like saying like, how can I make an impact not only on my client but in the whole community that's facing this issues that could be like systematic or even in the healthcare profession, you know? So I think that's something
Yeah.
that I'm really passionate about, just advocating for those who might not have a voice, or they obviously they do, but they might not be able to express themselves just because they're not seen by society. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but also I agree with you just researching, you know, as counselors we have to
Mhm.
engage in research and make sure we are updated with research that is effective and it's going to help our client. So
Mhm.
I definitely agree with those two.
That's a really good point. I didn't even make that connection, but absolutely, we are social advocates for our communities. And so we do want to make sure that we are supporting people who are vulnerable, whether that's the elderly or people from different backgrounds or low SES communities. And I have learn some resources to help some of my community. Um, and also like it has us think forward, like when you're a counselor, how are you going to maintain cultural relevance and how are you going to that social advocacy and it asks those questions of us and then we say okay well I'm going to host group sessions or I'm going to donate to a weekend out of the month for people who couldn't afford and I will donate my services or things like that so we really start making these long-term goals that include advocacy and include kind of raising um like the community, just uplifting the community as a whole and not just overlooking the vulnerable, but empowering the vulnerable and giving them resources. So that's a really good point that you made that I totally spaced on. So yeah, I think that's a really important tool that we've learned as well.
Yes, yes. And also I feel it goes along with our privilege as counselors, which is just being able to advocate for our patients and using that
Hmm.
privilege for good, not only um, in our environmental setting, but for the community and for those who need those resources and need to be advocated
Yes.
for. So yes,
And that ties into something that we are meeting with the professor, which is we are privileged by our education, and don't forget that. So, and then they made a mention of like, don't put your education on the wall if that's going to intimidate your clients. I mean, you can still talk about your background and where you came from and your education, but it doesn't need to be oppressive, you know? So it can be something, it is, I mean, it is privilege. I mean, worked hard to get to this point, but it is something that others have not gotten to in their lives at that point. And so it puts them in a box outside of the bubble that we're in. So um, that is very true. Make sure that we are cognizant of our privilege, even as counselors, especially as counselors.
right, yeah. I really, I don't know, I really enjoy the conversation. I like hearing you present about a certain aspect of multicultural um that you struggle with and that I struggle with. I think it puts us in perspective as like future counselors. We have different challenges,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I think it ties up of how are we becoming the best versions of ourselves and showing that growth in order to when we do become counselors, how are we gonna use those resources we learn on all that information to be there for the client
Mhm.
and support them.
Mhm. That's true. I agree. Like favorite memories that I have with you, especially, are learning about your transition into college. It has such relevance. You know, it has such relevance to us as counselors to remember those stories because um, the differences are also the beauty. So it's fun learning about how what we overcame as us as individuals as well. So yeah, you're right. We do have different things that we have that we bring to the table. And we will have different things as we progress through um this situation. Um, and that's what makes us individuals. And each person that we encounter in the counseling session is also going to be a unique individual. And we have to treat them as an individual and not as a person from a community necessarily. So just get to know them. And that's really important is getting to know them individually. So, and I